And hello gamers. It has been a long road. We have finally reached the end of the series. Now, those of you just joining, or maybe watching this later, because this will be archived here on YouTube, I've been doing a series here on Gamers Bay about classic Atari arcade games from the early half of the 1980s. And these are games that are on a compilation called Atari Vault. You can find it on Steam. I think it's also on console, I believe. But it's from a company called it's Code Mystics. I had the copyright in the copyright's in the description, and there is a link to the Steam page for the game in the video description below. But it's a compilation of not all of Atari's arcade games. There are some games that are not in the list, and these are a lot of their earliest stuff. This is their stuff from the very late 70s to early 80s before the crash. The latest game that's released on here is from 1983-84, which the crash occurred in 83-84. That's when the video game crash took place. We are now at the final 3 games in the collection. The final 3 games. And one of these is one that I've been wanting to look at for a long time. Now, it's a game called Major Havoc. It is a vector graphics game. Now, vector graphics means that it's not raster-based graphics. If you want to know what the difference is between raster and vector graphics, take a look at 2 different games. Take a look at Pac-Man, and then take a look at Tempest. Tempest is vector graphics, and it requires a different kind of screen. Your average arcade game had a screen that was really no different than your average, computer terminal or television, where it would draw a single scan line or 2 scan lines or more across the screen in rapid succession to draw a picture. Now, a vector graphics display was very different. Instead of drawing every line for a frame on the screen, the vector graphics display would only draw a line where it was needed. And what this did is, this had the effect of having a screen with very wide contrast, very strong contrast, very strong visuals to it. Now, Atari at first had just black and white, and then they developed a chip that would power the display with color graphics. Now, they had vector graphics displays back in the day because there were computer-aided design systems back then. They were simpler than what there were today, but they were dedicated machines specifically for CAD. And they even had light pens for manipulating objects on the screen back in that time. It was very simple. They were not that advanced. Most of them were made by IBM back in that time. But they did exist. And the screens were also used in other industries. They were used in the medical industry. They were used in flight control, air traffic control for radar displays. Vector graphics were used for that as well. So these screens were readily available to them. But Atari had to make their own drivers for them, had to create their own chips to power them. Now, most of Atari's arcade games also utilized MOS technology 6502 processor. Some of them had 2 MOS 6502s in them. The game that we're about to look at had that. And also, Atari pioneered some of their own technology. They created some of their own hardware for powering trackball controllers, which they used for Centipede and other games. And also they developed their own audio chip called the Pokey chip, which is used in a lot of their arcade games. In fact, this next one that we're going to look at, and one I've been waiting to look at, has 4 of them. 4 of these chips. Right, the game we're going to look at is Major Havoc. This is our first game. This is not going to be a very long live stream. These games are very simple, so this is going to be about an hour or so long live stream. Not going to be that long, maybe 2 hours at most. And then that will be the end of this series. And when this is concluded, then I'm going to switch over to the Atari console games, the 2600 games. Atari Vault has a large collection of Atari 2600 titles. So we're going to be looking at those in a video series coming up very soon after this. And of course, I will continue doing other long-form live streams on Zorch Central. We're going to be going back to Elite Dangerous. We stopped for a while because there was a game-breaking bug in the game, but that's been dealt with. So we're going to be getting back into that. Here, I'm going to be continuing to do more stuff like Overwatch, and I'm also planning on doing stuff with Destiny 2 when it comes out, and various other games. And I need to mute my phone, but you know, some great stuff is coming. I do plan to get back into Chloe and the Professor over on my channel, but let's talk about Major Havoc. Now, this game came out in '83, and in a lot of ways it was ahead of its time. Way ahead of its time. Its vector graphics had really good animation for its time, and the person who was involved in the development of the game is someone whose name that you will recognize. Mark Cerny. The Mark Cerny. That Mark Cerny. Father of Crash Bandicoot. He worked at Atari for a time, and he came in during the development of this game, and he helped design some of the mazes and levels of this game. And this one is fairly unique when it comes to Atari's arcade games. I mean, it's a fairly unique game. You'll see for yourself. I completely suck at it, of course, as I do with most of these arcade games. I never played this in the actual arcade. I've seen it, but I never got a chance to actually play the game. Why? Because there was always a line in front of it. There were always so many people waiting in line to play the thing. I never got a chance to actually play it. I got the chance to watch other people play it, and I've been wanting to play it for a long time. I remember it was at Fairlane Town Center, the arcade in Fairlane Town Center near the Sears store. I would go with my mom, me and my friends, they would come with their mothers, and they would go to the beauty shop that's in Sears. And we would stay at the arcade. She'd give us a bunch of quarters. She would give me a bunch of quarters, and I would play like on the Star Trek arcade game. I would play Missile Command. There were a few early Laserdisc games out. I tried Dragon's Lair. There was another one. It was where you controlled a ship, and it used a Laserdisc footage for the background. That was really fun. But the game I've always wanted to play, was Major Havoc, and it was always busy. Always busy. And so this arcade was in Fairlane Town Center in Detroit, Michigan. And it was the only place I ever saw this game. The only place. Never saw it anywhere else. There were a lot of other arcades around. There were several on Michigan Avenue. I believe there was one on Verner in Detroit. There was a few in Detroit. There was one, it was still there even after it closed down, and then finally after I moved out of Detroit, it finally got cleaned out. It was still there on Werner, I believe. And there was one on Telegraph Road. I mute my phone. There was one on Telegraph Road in Taylor, Michigan, and a friend of mine used to go there a lot in the 90s, and it was never there. There was one other arcade we used to go to. I forget what the mall is. It was a fairly large arcade, and we played Mortal Kombat there. Mortal Kombat and Pit Fighter. And various Neo Geo games. That was during the 90s, and it was never there either. And it was never... And Cedar Point, a amusement park, world famous for its roller coasters, had a 2-story arcade with some really old arcade games there. They had some classic arcade games, but they never had this. Never had this. This was pretty advanced for its time. I mean, it even almost looks like a modern machine to get into the game. You know, the console itself. And I'm surprised that there isn't more material. Every time I do these videos, I look at the gallery in Atari Vault to look at, you know, what promotional material there is, what sort of manuals there are that came with the game, because a lot of them come with maintenance and repair manuals, and some of those have some interesting artwork on them. Some of them came with brochures. Sometimes there were brochures given out at conventions, amusement, you know, the amusement conventions, which are still going on. They focus more on vending machines now than anything, because arcades are pretty much dead here in the US. They're still very much alive overseas. Over in Europe, you can still find them. Japan, you can't help but trip over them. But I'm surprised there isn't more material. There isn't more stuff for this game, considering how advanced it was. I think maybe the reason why there isn't a lot about this game is because it came so close to the crash. The crash happened so soon after it was launched. And that's a shame, because this is a fairly advanced arcade game. When you look at some of the games of its time, this was fairly advanced. I mean, you start the game out, it's almost like a Galaga sort of game in the beginning, and it uses almost a 3D-like perspective. And then after that, you land the ship, so almost like a lunar lander style, not quite like a lunar lander style. And then after that, you get out of the ship and you walk around through a maze, and you have to dodge enemies. You can't shoot. You don't have a gun. You dodge enemies. You dodge these things that will kill you. You have to reach the core in these bases, and then escape. So in a way, it plays a little bit like Berserk without weapons. And it even had a story. I mean, you supposedly, humanity was enslaved by a race of aliens, that their empire fell, but their automated space stations still exist. So you are a hero from antiquity, cloned by a bunch of scientists, and you're the part of a whole army of clones that are going out and taking out these space stations. These space stations run by robots. And that's the story of the game. The game actually had a story. It wasn't tied into the Atari Force comics that were out at the time, which I'm surprised it wasn't. And again, I said Mark Cerny was involved with the development of this. Now, the other games that we're going to look at today also is Millipede. Millipede came from Ed Logg. Ed Logg, of course, is the guy who developed Centipede. And I believe he also worked... Nope, that was the other one. And then lastly, Missile Command. Missile Command was a game that came out in 1980. It was the height of the Cold War. So it was a topical game at the time where you had to defend a bunch of cities. That was developed by David Thurer, and he modeled the cities in the game after various cities in California. San Diego, Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Luis Obispo. I hope I got that right. There were 6 cities. I don't remember all of them. I don't think Sacramento was one of them, but he based them off of the 6 cities in California, and he used to have nightmares during the development of the game. David Thurer used to have nightmares about the destruction of these cities in a nuclear war. And that was a real threat back then in the 80s. Nuclear destruction was a real threat. It was the height of the Cold War, paranoia over the Soviet Union. It was a different time. In a lot of ways, it was a more simpler time for a lot of us. I kind of miss going to the arcades. I miss the arcade. There was something about going there. It was the mystique of going into, a dark arcade with black lighting or dark blue lighting on, sometimes blue or red lighting on the roof. You'd hear Devo sticks, flock of seagulls on the speakers from the stereo system. Walk in, and it was a different time. Arcade games still cost just $0.25. I think they were actually a little cheaper back then. $0.25, some of them. But they were still not expensive to play. And we went there with our friends and had fun. And I miss those times. I really do. And a lot of ways I wish arcades would come back. I know consoles are partially what killed off the arcades. What mainly did it was the crash. The video game crash. What mainly was the nail in the coffin was the crash. But consoles later destroyed them in the 90s. And also the stupidity of politicians. Stupidity of the average person. Because arcades got this bad stigma of being places where crime took place. That was true. Some places there were drug deals in arcades and everything, but not everywhere. But they got this bad stigma, and here in the United States, people tend to act before thinking. And so arcades were killed off. You can still find a few scattered here and there in different places. There used to be the Red Baron arcade for a long time in Taylor, Michigan. That's gone now. That was sitting in a Red Baron restaurant for the longest time. Now that's completely gone. There was an arcade here. Here where we live in Texas, there was an arcade in the mall here. Now it's gone. It wasn't a very big arcade. It was small, but it's gone now. And I wish they would come back. I think there's room for them, because it's not just about going there and plunking down quarters to play games. It's about having a place where you can go and you can meet people also, because arcades were where you went to hang out with your friends, hang out and meet people. Wasn't about, you know, just going there and just plunking down a bunch of quarters and playing a bunch of games and then going home. It was about the social experience. And we really don't have that. The internet's pretty much replaced arcades for the most part. And we can still play with our friends. We can still talk with them. You know, we can voice chat with them on our consoles. We can voice chat them with various tools on the PC. Discord, TeamSpeak, Mumble, Steam voice chat. But there's still no replacement for the experience of the arcade. And I think that's why that flourishes so well over in places like Japan and Tokyo, where you literally can't go anywhere without stumbling over them. Anywhere. Where a couple was recently married in one. Yes, there was a couple in Tokyo who were actually married in an arcade. They met in an arcade. They actually met in an arcade, and they got married in one. And before leaving on their honeymoon, they played a game of Tekken. That's how they met. So, it's a social experience. I mean, that's an example of what these places were. And they receive such a bad stigma here in the US, and it's sad. So, I didn't intend for this to be a sad stream. I didn't intend for this to be, you know, anything like that. I wanted to just basically tell you how I felt about them. Tell you how I felt about arcades back in the day. How I wish they would come back in a lot of ways. And to enjoy these games with you. Show you what they're all about. Because no one else is talking about these. And there aren't very many YouTubers out there who are actually covering these classic arcade games. They're literally almost forgotten. No one's doing videos on Atari Vault except me. I'm one of the few people out there that's actually doing an entire series on this game. No one else. Nobody else has done it. I'm about to cover every single arcade game in Atari Vault. No one else has ever done that. No one else. And they really should, because where else are you going to play these? Unless you've got a private collection someplace, or you find someplace that still has an arcade and they have a bunch of these games, where else are you going to play them? Where else? Other than your own home on MAME. Where else are you going to find them? Where else are you going to play them? I mean, this is a forgotten era. This is the golden age of video games, and it's all but forgotten. So let's stop being sad here, and let's get into the games themselves. So our first game is going to be Major Havoc. Let's go take a look. Alrighty then. I've got the window set up on my other display so I can see anyone who speaks in text chat. As I said, Major Havoc was a vector graphics game. Now this is of course not actual vector graphics on here. This is simulated vector graphics, but as you're about to see, this game is ahead of its time. and it's almost forgotten. It's almost forgotten. And as I said here, there's not much in the way of material for this. There's a cover for a pamphlet that was given out at conventions to tell people about the game. There's the cover for the manual, and that's it. That's all there is in the gallery. There's no other materials. There's some of these other games had stickers and patches, and this game is so advanced for an arcade game, and there's nothing on it. Nothing. I'm flabbergasted about it. But let's get into the actual game and you'll see what the gameplay's all about. That mouse pointer. And here you can see the attract screen right here. Give you an idea of what this game is like. The arrows point you in the way. You have to pick up oxygen along the way. And there he's got the reactor. Got a temporary shield. More oxygen. And look at the animation of the character. This is vector graphics. Vector graphics. That was detailed animation. Now, as I said, and the music is from the four Poke Chips that are in this. And this is being driven by those two MOS 6502s. Not in this, of course. This is emulated. But the original hardware used those two MOS 6502s. So let's get in here and see what this is all about. Very much like... It starts out a lot like... what do you call it? Alright, now. Oh. And bump your head. Oh, ah. Yeah, those things will fly around and kill you. Alright. Okay, next one. Wrappers. Can't let that get down there. And alright, this is the one I was in just a moment ago. Nope, oh, I think this is a slightly different one. Ah! Reactor. load up. Whoa. Ah! Ah! I gotta start this all over again. Stuck at the white platform. Okay. Actually followed me. At least I got it. Alright. Oops. Ah! Well, at least the thing that killed me is... Ah! Always... Okay. Oops. Ow. Take out the first one. Oh! Ah, crap. Oh, wait, forgot about that other game. Ah, crap. Ah. and up. Getting pretty good at that first one. Ah. Get this time. Okay. Ah. Oh. Come on. Ah. Oy. That is Major Havoc, and it's pretty much that. You have these mazes, you have to get through them. There are these various robots and obstacles that are trying to kill you, and you have no weapons to fight back against. Back. So you have to dodge everything. Sort of like, in a way, it's sort of like Impossible Mission that way. I don't think that had weapons either. But as you can see, this is a little sophisticated for its time, and was vector graphics during this. So it had like 3D effects, and there was a lot of things going on. This is a fairly complex, concept for an arcade game from that time. Fairly advanced. So this was a major leap in arcade games for that era, and the game's all but forgotten by people. All but forgotten. I've remembered this game since first seeing it, and I've been wanting to play it ever since. And it's it's been worth the wait. I really need to mute my phone. But yeah, it's been worth the wait, and it's been fun. I completely suck at it, but it's been fun, and that's the whole thing. Playing these games because they're fun. And they were hard back then. The people who are into instant gratification, they want easy games. People today, I think that's why not a lot of people are getting into these, because the instant gratification crowd wants those easy games. And these games are not easy. These games are hard. These games are very hard. These games will punish you. So that was Major Havoc. And a game that I never got to play in the original arcades. Never got the chance. So let's move on to our next game. Tell you a little bit about that. The next game we're going to be looking at is Millipede. Millipede is the sort of sequel to Centipede, and it's by Ed Logg, and Ed Logg worked on the original Centipede, and he's worked on a variety of other games for Atari. Again, it has a Pokey chip. I believe this one has 2, and it uses a MOS 6502, just one of them. And it was almost as popular as the original Centipede. Almost as popular, and you can find these in most arcades back in the day, and even in the 90s. Red Baron had a Millipede machine also. You could find these all over the place. From time to time, you can find these in little places like pizzerias and other places that still have an arcade machine sitting around. And a lot of arcade collectors will have one of these cabinets sitting in their collection. And it's a raster based. The last 2 games in this list are raster based games. There aren't any more vector graphics based games in this. In fact, as far as I know, when this era ends, there will be no more vector graphics based arcade games after this. Everything after this point is raster based. And then polygonal 3D. In fact, one of the developers for these games actually went on to create one of Atari's first polygonal 3D games. That was Dave Thurrow, who worked on Missile Command. He went on to develop one of Atari's first 3D polygon based arcade games called iRobot. So let's take a look at Millipede. Okay. Now, unlike Major Havoc, was a lot more material for this artwork. This was from a brochure given out at the conventions, event conventions. Also promo material given arcade owners. Poster might be from a brochure or magazine ad. But there's a lot more material on this game. And of course this was a high profile game because it was a sequel to the original. It was a sequel to the original Millipede. So let's get into the game and show you what it's all about. Again, you can see from the cabinet here, it's a trackball game, and that of course used the trackball controller that Atari developed for their arcade games. Again, I said also Pokey chip for audio. And here we got your raster based graphics. No longer is this vector based graphics. This is drawn in a similar manner to your standard televisions of the time. Get in, play us some Millipede. Ah! Okay. Oh yes, I forgot the DVD. Ah! Yes! DDT was concerns about DDT was a thing back in this time. I got the flea. Ah! You are annoying. Get out of there. hand of these things. I got the DDT. Alright. I mentioned I suck at these games. Got me. Oh, got most of them. Come on. Alright, got it. Oh! Go, 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 whoa, 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 whoa. Hey, 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 watch it. Ah. Go away. Alright, some more. Come on. Fighter, go. Go away. Oh, I got most of it. Oh. Remember now. Oh. Come on. Hard. One more time. Hitting that. Oh, did you just see that? whoa. Hey. Hey, I got a free guy. Ah! Everything on screen. Whoa, whoa! Ah! Holy crap. Okay. Yeah, that's Millipede. Basically Centipede with the intensity turned way up. It's a lot harder. As I said, these games are harder than the games we have today. You think games are hard today? Well, Dark Souls is hard, but this is indicative of the games back in the day. They were just hard as shit, and they punished you bad if you made a mistake. And this particular one was pretty rough, especially this one. Basically, Centipede with the intensity turned way up. Oh, this is Centipede. As I said, this was not going to be a very long live stream today. Just covering these last 3 games. But yeah, that was intense. Oh, wow. And with my vision, I can't see everything on the screen. I've got these blind spots that blends in, so sometimes the enemies are there and I don't see them there. I just see green because it blends in with my vision. It just blends in the background, and so I don't see them there, and when I move my hip, boom, I get hit. So wow. Whew. I had almost completely forgotten about the DDT. And I took out one of the centipedes completely with DDT, and I got a Steam achievement for it. So wow, that was a thing. And the flowers, I forgot the flowers were indestructible. And these guys, I think those are the yeah, those are the dragonflies. Yep, dragonfly, mosquito. Bees, I think the bees were the ones that were diving before. Spiders. The spiders are significantly more annoying in this game than they were in Centipede. Significantly more annoying. So, let's take a look at our final game. The final game, as I said, was the designer of the final game was David Thurer. David Thurer. And he would go on to develop Atari's first polygonal 3D arcade game called iRobot. Was an interesting achievement. That would come out later. But Missile Command was a game I had on the Atari 2600. In fact, that version is in this collection in Atari Vault. And it was a game that was around, you know, I really should mute my phone. Keep repeating that. But Missile Command was a game that was born from the fears of the Cold War. Fears of nuclear annihilation by the Soviet Union. And while, you know, there are those who are trying to drum up that fear again to justify more war, back then it was a very real possibility, very real threat. And that permeated our culture. That's why we had movies like Terminator 2 and Mad Max, because of the fear of nuclear annihilation. That was a thing. Interestingly, Japan was the only country that actually experienced nuclear bombs in war. They actually know what surviving a nuclear detonation is like. They actually experienced it, and yet we were living in fear. They actually experienced it. Anyway, I didn't want to get into politics with this, but Missile Command was a game I played at Fairlane Town Center in the arcade there, and various other places. I believe also the Renaissance Center arcade, which was a short-lived place that I went to once. I played various games there and Missile Command, and I played a variety of different games I had never seen before. Galaga and various games like that. So let's get into Missile Command, the final game on our list. This will finally round out the Atari arcade games of the 80s. Let's get into that. Last game on the list. Finally, after all this time, we're finally here. Missile Command. Game born out of Cold War fears. Here's one of the... Here's the design for the classic cabinet. See, this is a pin. There was a sit-down version. These are very rare. I have never actually seen one in person. Only seen the stand-up cabinet. These sit-down versions are really rare. Really hard to find. So if you are a collector of arcade games, you got one of these, you probably got a rarity there. And of course some promo material. There was a cocktail table version of this game. In fact, I actually played one. I don't remember where it was. I think it was a Pizza Hut. Pizza Hut had arcade game cocktail table cabinet versions of arcade games. I played Pac-Man at one once, but I had one somewhere. I don't know if it was the one in Dearborn. I don't know if it was the Pizza Hut in Dearborn, but I actually did play one at a Pizza Hut. Or was that Elias Brothers? It's been so long ago. I actually did play Missile Command on the original cocktail table. And again, it's trackball. Uses that same trackball controller. Uses a MOS 6502, and it uses a Pokey chip. Just one. Oh, let's get in here and just watch me suck. The whole point of this is that you have these stations and you have limited ammo, and you have to protect your 6 cities from these incoming missiles. You're basically a missile point defense. Your bombs, the missiles you fire, explode, and you have to catch these in an explosive range. The Atari 2600 port of this is actually fairly faithful to the original. Not like the Atari 2600 port of Pac-Man. That was awful. That was horrendously bad. This, the Atari 2600 port of this, is actually surprisingly faithful to the original. But let's get into this. Even the sound effects are similar. Uh-oh. Oh. got them all. Save my city. Watch out for this, they'll fly by and they'll... Oh, okay, I gotta manage that a lot better. Oh! Lost the base. No, I didn't lose the base. Ooh! Oh! Yeah. That was the thing. Alright, let's do this again. Remember, 3 bases and fire. I got him. One more time. Whew. 70s. Oh. Yeah. I lost there. Oh. Well, that's Missile Command. Fairly simple game, simple premise, shoot down the missiles, protect your cities. A game born out of the fears of the Cold War era. And it gave its developer nightmares of nuclear annihilation when he was working on it. That was a thing. So I had a lot of fun playing these games. It was a fun, nostalgic romp for all of them. Let's take a look at all the games that were in this list, because this is the last one here. All right. So our journey began with Pong from the 70s. Early game was not the very first arcade game out there by any imagination, but it was the first to become really popular. Very popular. It was the first to really show the potential of arcade games. The next was Red Baron. Red Baron, an early vector graphics game, again showing the potential of what these games were capable of. It was sort of a pseudo 3D using vector graphics, which was easy to do back in the day. And all these machines used the MOS 6502 in some variant. Right, then we moved to Space Duo. Space Duo is sort of like, in a lot of ways, it's almost like Space War. Its premise. One of the earliest raster-based games, black and white graphics. With Sprint 2. Played this in Cedar Point, and Baby Boy 2747 says, "What's up? Hey, what's up?" Okay, so the next game I covered in the list was Super Breakout. This was another really popular game back in the day that brought people into the arcades. This is where games started to get a little more complex. It was where Atari introduced a new kind of vector graphics chip that could do color. There were vector color graphics screens at the time for computer-aided design systems. And they were able to drive almost pseudo 3D graphics with their graphics chip. Get the Warlords, and this used a color overlay on the screen for the colors, and it was a raster-based game, fairly simple. I never played the arcade version of this. I played the Atari 2600 version originally. Asteroids. This game has been ported and mimicked all over the place. I played the original in various arcades. I had the Atari 2600 port, which is playable. It's actually not that bad when it comes to 2600 ports of arcade games. This was the game that really kicked off the arcade craze. This really helped to kick it off. Asteroids Deluxe. Not as successful as Atari would have hoped it to have been. It had a background overlay for the game, and it introduced a few new ideas, but it never really kicked off all that well. Black Widow. This was a mod for another arcade game in the list, and this was a more fairly more complex game where you controlled a spider, and it played a little bit like Robotron. Forget the date, Robotron 2084 or something around that lines. But it played a little bit like that, and it was fairly sophisticated for its time. Then, of course, we went to Centipede, and Centipede, everyone should know this one. The venerable game that was really popular back in the day. We just got done playing Millipede, which was a much more advanced version, the sort of sequel to this, and that turned up the intensity really high. Crystal Castles, one of my favorite Atari 2600 games. The first time I ever played this arcade version. I never saw this anywhere else. I never played this anywhere else in any arcade. Gravatar. Gravatar is the game that was moddable to Black Widow. This was an interesting one where you had to constantly fight gravity while also fighting enemies. Liberator. Liberator is, this game is tied into the Atari Force comic books. And it's based around that premise, which the comic books are themselves inspired by Super Sentai, Japanese Super Sentai, and superhero anime like G-Force, Gatchaman, such. Lunar Lander. Very early vector graphics game from Atari. Very simple. You are fighting the force of gravity to land your ship in safe zones on various parts of the moon. Simple to explain, difficult to master. This is a hard game to learn. Very hard game to master. Then we got the Major Havoc, and as you saw, Major Havoc was very sophisticated for its time. It had various gameplay aspects. It had this little breakout mini game in the transition screen that gave you bonus points if you were able to get rid of all the blocks. And it's interesting. This is a game that Mark Cerny, who would later form Naughty Dog, worked on in his early years in game development. Millipede. Centipede with the intensity turned way up. A lot of new enemies, and as you saw, it could get really hectic and really, really fast. And then finally, the game we just played, Missile Command, a game born out of the fears of the Cold War era of nuclear annihilation. It's been an interesting journey going through all of these games. I'm surprised at how long it's taken to go through this whole series. I'm surprised how few there are actually here. Actually, not that many. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 15, 16, 17, 18. Yeah, 18 games. I'm surprised that there aren't more. I know that there were a few more of these that Atari made. Of course, these are the only ones that Code Mystics could actually get the license for from Atari. Yeah, most of these I played in the arcades. A lot of them I didn't. A lot of them I've never seen in the arcades before. Missile Command's one of the games that I did. I've actually played an original Pong machine one as well, and Red Baron. But yeah, this is it. The last of this series. Now, after this, I am going to get into the 2600 games. In fact, look at them now. Let's go through the list of games that I'm going to be doing videos on in the new series. Classic Atari 2600 titles. Combat was a pack-in game with the Atari 2600, where it was a two-player game where you controlled two tanks. And when I got mine, we had a black and white TV. Yes, a black and white TV. And me and my dad would play this. This was back in 1977. I had this. I had a 6-banger Atari 2600 console with the wood grain, which is, I believe that's the rare one. Combat 2, never saw this, never played it before. I have no idea what this is about, so this is going to be interesting. And a lot of these games are 2-player only, so I'm going to have a special guest in here with me playing these when I do. So it'd be interesting. Now, you can do multiplayer for a lot of these games that are multiplayer. You can play multiplayer over the internet. So that's likely what we're going to do. We're probably going to have Discord set up so we can talk. Won't be in the exact same room. I have multiple controllers, but you try to combine two 360 controllers at once. It's sort of 360 style controllers. It really ticks off the computer. Crystal Castles. This is where I played the game originally. This was one of my favorite Atari 2600 games. This version is the one that I played originally. And I never played the arcade version until I did this series. Never played it until I did this series. The arcade version. Demons to Diamonds. I like this game. I had this game on the 2600. Used a paddle controller for that, which Steam controller is very good at mimicking that. Desert Falcon. Never played it. It'd be interesting to see what this is all about. Never played this game, but I'm curious to see what this game's about. Dodge 'em. Played it, not at home. There was this at Kmart, back when Kmart was still a thing. There was still a place that most people went to. There was this big kiosk, and what you could do, it was loaded up with dozens of games. You walked up to it and you pushed a button, and it would load up that particular game that you wanted to try. Dodge 'em was one of them. I think I remember playing that at one time. They had two machines like that. They had one for the Atari 2600 and one for the Intellivision, and the Intellivision one always had people at it, and I could never really get a chance to try it out. Maybe once I did. They had like a game that where you controlled tanks. It was similar to Combat, and it had like trees and various other obstacles. It was a much more advanced version of Combat, and it was pretty impressive. The Intellivision was technically more advanced than the Atari 2600 was. Double Dunk. Never played it. Be interesting to try it. It's 2-player. And Fatal Run. Never played this either. It looks a little bit like Enduro. In fact, this might be Atari's answer to Activision's Enduro. Interesting. Capture the Flag. Never played this. I've seen it in catalogs, but I've never played it. Football. Yes, I played this. A friend of mine had it. It sucks. Golf. I had this. It's fun. Gravatar. Never played the Atari 2600 version. And that was the first time I actually played the arcade version when I did this series too. Hangman. I knew someone who actually had this. We're in Iosco County, where my parents had their cabin, and right across the street from from the cabin. There was a home owned by a guy named Woody Ferguson, and he was a former chairman of the UAW. He was a former chairman of a local UAW group, and he owned a place that was a replica of a ranch he had down in Tennessee. And he would come up, and his grandkids would come up, and they had an Atari 2600, and they had this game. They also had the next game, Haunted House, and I later got this also. Fun game. I like this one. Home Run, the Atari baseball game. Never played it. Human Cannonball. Played this at a friend's house once. Maze Craze. Never played this one. Or Millipede. I played Atari 2600 Centipede. Never played Millipede. Mini Golf. Never played this one. Missile Command. I actually owned this. So I actually did own this, and I played it quite often on the Atari 2600. Challenging game even there. Night Driver. Never played the Atari 2600 version, but I did play the arcade version quite a bit. In fact, in Iosco County, again, up in Michigan, when my parents had a cabin, there would always be the Iosco County Fair, and the Iosco County Fair usually had an arcade tent, and they almost always had this game. Off the Wall. Never played this. Looks like a Breakout clone. Never did play it. Outlaw. Yes, I did play this one. I do believe I did play this one at a friend's house once. Pong Sports. Never played this. Quadrant. Not this game. So I played something similar to it, which was Cosmic Arc from Imagic, which was technically a sequel to another Imagic game called Atlantis. Race. Never had this. Radar Lock. Never had this either. Never played this game either. So this would be interesting to play. And Real Sports Baseball. This was when they were getting a little more sophisticated to try and compete with the Intellivision. Had a better baseball game. Real Sports Basketball. Never played any of these. Boxing. Never did play this game either. A lot of these I never played before. Real Sports Football. Real Sports Soccer, which they called it football because overseas they call it foot. We're special here in U.S. We call football soccer, and they call soccer football. Real Sports Tennis, again, never played that before. Real Sports Volleyball. Actually played this. Actually did play this one. Turn to Haunted House. Never played it. Never played it before. So it'd be interesting. Most of these games I've never played in this series. Most of them. So this is going to be interesting. Save Mary. Again, never played it. Another game I never played before. Completely new to me. This is Secret Quest. Looks like it might be a sequel to Adventure, or a more advanced version of Adventure. Adventure was a game I had, and it was a fun game. I liked that one. I played that one a lot. So this is going to be interesting to play. Sentinel. Never played this one either. I've never played this one before. Skydiver. I've seen it, but I've never played it. Slot machines. I have played this one at a friend's house. Slot racers. I believe I used to own this. Actually, I think I did have this game. Space War. Yes, I had this as well. Sprint Master. Never had this, never played it. Star Raiders. Yes, I had this. In fact, I had the keypad with the plastic overlay that went over the keypad to let you know what the function buttons were for various things. So I actually had this. I don't know how this is going to play without that pad, because you don't have it in this version. So we're going to see what that's like with this. So yeah, I had this and I played a lot of this. Because Activision at the time also had a game out called Star Master, which was similar. Didn't require a keypad like this one did. Starship. I've never played this one either. Steeplechase. A friend of mine actually had this. I played it. Stellar Track. Never played this. Street Racer. I do not recall ever playing this one. Stunt Cycle. I never played this one either. Submarine Commander. I can not confirm that I did not play this. Super Baseball. I can confirm I never played that. Super Breakout. Played the arcade version in this series. Never played the... No. Actually, I played this at my aunt's house way back when. Atari 2600. Alright, Super Football. Never played that one. Surround. Yes, I played this one. Friend who actually had this. So I did actually play this one. Now, these. There's a story behind these. Okay, first, I never played them, but I knew someone who had them and they were playing them. What the story behind these are adventure games, almost like early RPGs. And what you would do is you would solve various puzzles, and when you solve them, you would get a code. And what you would do is you'd send that code in. And what they were going to do is they were originally going to have 4 games in the series. They never got that far because the video game crash happened. And those who won, those who actually solved all the puzzles and so ultimately solved the final puzzle, would win a variety of different prizes. And these were solid gold items with actual gemstones. These were worth tens of thousands of dollars. Like they were a sword. There was some other thing. I think it was a container of some kind. A variety of things. And from what I understand, only a few of them were, only like 1 or 2 were awarded, and the rest are sitting in Nolan Bushnell's house on display, in the display cabinet. The final game of the series was never released because of the crash, video game crash. So they were never awarded to people. So these games were behind this whole thing. There's a documentary on YouTube that you can watch about this. Those prizes were worth a lot of money. They dumped a lot of money into them, and I think that's why when the crash happened, it hit so hard, that they had spent so much making these solid gold and gemstone encrusted awards for this game. And a lot of companies were doing similar stuff to that. They were just dumping money into things. That's why I am so afraid about another crash today, because big companies, back then Atari was a humongous company, and today we've got big companies dumping millions, even hundreds of millions into games that are starting to get really poor reviews that people are getting really sick of because they're either franchises that have been completely played out, that have no innovation to them, that are just being milked because fanboys are still buying them, mindlessly buying the games, and they're shipping with severe bugs, severe problems that should never have passed basic, QA. And that's why I'm so concerned that there is another crash coming, because what we have now mirrors what we had back then. It mirrors it. It is not 1-to-1, but it's darn close. It's close enough to be really freaking scary. And so there is the possibility. You cannot discount the fact that there is a possibility. Because if it continues, if a high-profile game from EA, Activision, or Ubisoft really tanks, it could spark off another crash. Now, will video games go away because of that? No. I think the crash will mostly impact the big AAA studios this time. Indie studios are doing a lot better because they're more flexible, they're more nimble, they're willing to take risks on new ideas and new concepts. Whereas the big companies, EAs, the Activisions, the Ubisofts, are so big, so inflexible, they don't come up with new ideas. They very rarely do. Very rarely do. So, if a crash happens, they're the ones that are going to get taken out. And we're going to be left with the indie game studios. And from them will rise a new age of AAAs, which I hope will learn from the mistakes of their predecessors and not let this happen again. But there were originally going to be 4 games in this series. Sword Quest Earthworld, Sword Quest Fireworld, Sword Quest Waterworld. I don't remember what the name of the 4th one was going to be. I think it was going to be Air World. But it was never released. Never released. This is one I've been interested in taking a look at. Tempest for the 2600. Because that's the only Atari console version of this that I've ever seen was Tempest 2000 Jaguar. Now, I never played that one directly. I've always played ports of it. And that was really, really good. So it'd be interesting to see how they implement this on the 2600, given how most arcade ports on the 2600 are total crap. Video Checkers, never played this. Video Chess, never played this. Video Pinball, yes, I played this. Warlords, oh god, yes. They used the paddle controllers, and I actually had 4 people in my room playing this. My friends back in the day. We actually played this quite a bit. Yar's Revenge. Oh, I played the crap out of this too. This was one of my favorite Atari 2600 games. Next to Crystal Castle, this is one of my favorites. I played the crap out of this. So I'm going to be covering this in the series as well. 3D Tic-Tac-Toe. Never played it. I guess a way 3D chess from Star Trek inspired this in a way. Adventure, another one of my favorite Atari 2600 games. Originally played this again in Woody's place with his grandkids. Originally played it there, and then I eventually got it, and it's a fun game. I like it. It's simple. It's a simplistic game, but it's fun. It's fun to play, and there's a hidden message in it. The hidden message from the developers, because back in the day, Atari would not credit its programmers for their games. They wouldn't credit them. So what they would do is that they would sneak credits in. You had to find these secret rooms. You find who designed what. And Atari, Adventure is one of those games. And I'm wondering if this has it. I don't remember how to get into that room. I have to look that up. See if I can actually do it. Now, Activision, interestingly enough, the company Activision was born because of that problem with Atari. Because Atari wouldn't credit its developers, wouldn't let them put their names on the box, or even as a credit in the game. Some people jumped ship from Atari, went and started their own company, and that company is Activision. Activision exists because Atari didn't want to give their developers any credit. Concentration. I never played this on the 2600. I did have the Concentration, the game, the game where you had to put the pegs and the various shapes in a board before it popped up, and before the timer ran out and it popped up and it sent all your board pieces flying. I had that Concentration. I didn't play this one. I don't know if they're the same game. Now this uses the touch, the keypad controls. So I don't know how this will play on here. I'll have to see. Air Sea Battle. I think I might have had this. Not sure. Asteroids, I did have this. It is a actually fairly decent port of the arcade version, surprisingly. Atari Video Cube, never played it. Backgammon, knew someone who had it, but I never played it. Basic Math, educational game for the Atari 2600. Didn't have it. Basketball, don't recall playing this one. Blackjack, never played it. Bowling, yes, I had this one. I had Atari Bowling. Terrain Games, I never had that one. Breakout, I played this, yes. Canyon Bomber, yes, I had this. This used the paddle controller. Yep, used the paddles. So I actually did have this. Casino, never played it. Never played this. Centipede, I did play this at my aunt's house. A surprisingly decent port of the original arcade game. Surprisingly decent port. Championship Soccer, no, never played this. Circus Atari, yes, I played this. Codebreakers, never played it. And then we're back to combat. So actually there's a lot more games here than there are the arcade games. So let's count them all. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 7, 8, 9, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 7, 38, 9, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 82 games. That's longer than the arcade game list. And I'm going to be doing an entire series on all of them, just like I did with the arcade games. And then what will happen is when we get to the last few games, I'll do another live stream like this, where we'll cover the last couple of games in the list to finish it off. So that's going to be coming up soon. So the very first game will be Combat. Now what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to get my roommate to get himself a copy of Atari Vault, and then set up with multiplayer and try this out first, and then record the video of it. But Combat will be the first game that I do in the series. So this has been fun, doing Atari Vault. Again, Atari Vault's on Steam. I think it might be on PS4 or Xbox One. I forget which. But it's a fun game. It's got a huge compilation of Atari 2600 games, a decent compilation of Atari classic arcade games from the 70s and 80s. So it's a fun game. So that has been all the arcade games in Atari Vault from the 80s. And I sort of miss that era. It was a different time. Maybe it's because I grew up during that time. I was a kid during that time. You know, we all have nostalgia for the early days. Things were simpler. You didn't have to worry about responsibility and bills and everything. It was a simpler time. But yeah, it's been fun going through. I had a lot of fun doing it, and I know I'm gonna have a lot of fun going through these Atari 2600 games. I have never played most of them. Like, the majority of them I've never played. Some of them I've never even heard of. So this is going to be interesting. This is going to be fun. And a lot of them, most of them are multiplayer. So expect my roommate to be in it. My roommate, who is, incidentally, if you watch any of the Elite Dangerous live streams that I do on Zorch Central, he's the guy. He's TigerCon on the that I play with on the other side of that. So he's going to be on here playing some of the multiplayer arcade Atari games on here. So I want to thank you all for anyone who's been watching. I know we had one person in a text chat from Gamers Bay. I'm sure most everybody here is going to be watching the stream from the recording, watching the archived footage of this. And I started this series very early on in my YouTube. I'm still working at this. I used to be very nervous in front of the camera. I was camera shy. I had difficulty just talking straight. I still do to some extent, but I've gotten a lot better. And I've also gotten a lot better doing these live streams. The first one I did was really rough, and then others were rough. This one's actually been fairly easy. So what have I have planned in the future for an old Gamer Plays? Well, again, the Atari 2600 games. Then after that, Commodore 64. Classic 1980s games for computers. Now if I can manage it, I may cover other classic systems such as the ZX Spectrum, BBC Micro, some Apple IIe stuff. We'll see how that pans out. Also, I will still be covering the more contemporary games. I have plans to cover Destiny 2 when it comes out. That will be on Battle.net for the PC. I plan on covering Fortnite from Epic Games. That's going to be an interesting game, interesting premise of a game. Unreal Tournament, the modern remake of Unreal Tournament that is in development between Epic and the Unreal community. That's still been in development. That's still there. It's really shaping up to be a good game. So I'm going to cover that. I'm going to also go back over a few games that I did videos on in the past. Toxic, show how far things have progressed, how more advanced it's become. Imperium Galactic Survival is another game that I may touch on here on Gamers Bay to show how far the game has advanced. They've made a lot of changes to it. So there's a lot of games that I'm going to cover, a lot of games I'm going to touch on. A lot of them are modern games. I don't have enough clout yet to get developers to send me keys for games. So that's a thing. Working on that. Zorch Central. What will I be doing there? I will continue streaming Elite Dangerous, and I will be doing Elder Scrolls Online at some point very soon, getting into Morrowind. As for Final Fantasy XIV, I haven't been playing that a lot lately. I don't know why. I get into these moods where I need to just put that game down for a while, because it takes a lot of resources to play it. A lot of mental resources to play Final Fantasy XIV. So I've set that game aside for a while. I like the game, but it takes a lot of mental resources to handle it, because there's so much there to do. So that's the gist of what's going to be happening. Elite Dangerous and Elder Scrolls Online live streams on Zorch Central, more Overwatch and retro games here on Gamers Bay. So, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments below. Also, remember that Gamers Bay has a community in Google+. It's one of the largest gaming communities there. We're one of the oldest gaming communities on Google+. We're originally built on retro gaming, so we have mostly an older membership. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't allow younger people to come and join. In fact, you are welcome to come and join no matter what your age. We are, open to everybody. But the one thing that you will not find in Gamers Bay on Google Plus is trolls. We don't tolerate that kind of behavior. We don't tolerate anti-socials in Gamers Bay. So if you in a gaming community and it is awful being there because of people who just don't act like decent human beings, come join us. And tell your friends to come join us too. Because we're friendly there. You will not find trolls there. So if you want a community that is nice, that's safe, it doesn't cater to PC and doesn't cater to political correctness and SJW crap, but is actually nice because we don't tolerate trolls, then join us. Come join us. and I think you'll like being there. And thank you for watching. As I said, this was not going to be a long live stream. In fact, actually it did turn out to be a little bit of a go. For I think it's been about 2 hours or so now. So this was not been that long a live stream. Again, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to me ramble and rant about the good old days of arcades. Listening to me reminisce. We talk about various games. I tend to ramble on a lot. I am right now. Rambling. Anyway, I like doing these videos. I like doing these live streams, and I'm going to continue doing them. Because, you know, if some people get enjoyment from it, great. That's why I do it. So, again, thanks for watching. Please consider subscribing and give us a like if you like the video. Till next time, I am Mike TheZorch, and I will see you guys later.